What's up, Net Soldiers? I'm the Alliance and welcome back to the video. Today we have a super special video, a video I've been requested to do for years now. This is the beginning of the Star Wars movies review series. Yes. It's so special, I actually am wearing a Star Wars related shirt, so kind of a big deal. Wait a second. I feel like I'm missing something. Give me 1 second.
A few moments later.
Alright. There we go. Yep. Perfect. Just... there's my burger cat. Okay. Now we can begin. Star Wars is one of the biggest franchises in the world. For over 40 years, Star Wars has been capturing the imaginations of people everywhere. Old and young. People just can't seem to get enough. However, while Star Wars had managed to unite many people together to create possibly the most powerful fan base ever, it also unintentionally created somewhat of a toxic one. As the old saying goes, no one hates Star Wars fans more than Star Wars fans. The reason for this hate could be linked to many different contributing factors, but that's neither here nor there. I'm not here today to talk about hate. I'm here to talk about love. I'm here today to begin a series I have been planning for a long time. My very own review on the Star Wars movies. Now I know what you may be thinking. Wait, there are already so many different Star Wars reviews out there. Change the record, homie. And that's true. Practically every other entertainment channel has reviewed these films. I've seen the Belated Media review, the Nostalgia Critic review, and of course, the Lord and Savior of all Star Wars movies review, Mr. Plinkett. But while every review is good in its own way, I'm here to say, I think I've created the best review on YouTube. Like, so good. Like, someone should throw me a parade. It's just that good. Now, of course, I'm kidding, but I tried my hand and crafted my very own review of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. But I'll be doing my review a little bit different from other people. I'm going to be tackling each section of the film one at a time. So I'll give a brief synopsis on what's going on in a certain part of the film, then I'll go back and review that specific part, giving my critiques and praises. I've never actually seen anyone else do a review like this, so I'm hoping it will feel fresh and interesting. Hopefully you guys like it. And one more thing, I'm going to be continuing these reviews through the next films. So if you enjoyed this video and you would like to see the reviews for the next movies, let me know in the comments below, and please remember to like, subscribe, and turn notifications and all that jazz. Also in this video, I'll be reviewing the entire Star Wars movie. Okay, so that means there's gonna be a spoiler alert. I feel like I shouldn't have to say that, but I apparently have to. And now, without further ado, let's begin. On May 19th, 1999, Star Wars The Phantom Menace was released in theaters, and it was an instant hit. People absolutely loved it. Till this day, it is known as one of the best films ever. Of course, if you haven't guessed by now, I'm actually lying, but I'm only half lying. Let me explain what I'm talking about. I feel as though the movie suffered from the new Star Wars movie syndrome, which is a term I created to explain how strange the fan base gets when a new Star Wars movie comes out. Hence the name. For some reason, when a new Star Wars movie comes out, it seems to be universally loved. Legit, everyone likes it. Then, after the movie and events sit inside people's minds for a day or two, they soon discover the film's flaws. From that point, I think people begin to feel personally attacked, and then that leads to the backlash. And here's the thing, I could be wrong, but I've noticed this happen ever since Episode 7 was released, and it has happened to every single film since that release, so maybe it's just me, and maybe this happened with the prequels. I was too young at the time, but it would make sense. Especially since Episode 1 was the first Star Wars movie released in over a decade. Actually, almost 2 decades. So it's safe to say fans of Star Wars were excited. If you want more insight on just how massive and impactful this film was at the time, I recommend a video from my friend and fellow YouTuber Star Wars Only. He kind of did a video covering all things the Phantom Menace. From the backlash to how people felt going in, how people felt coming out, and it was a really good video, so I definitely recommend you check that out if you think it's interesting. I'll leave it in the description below. So like I was saying, even if you disregard Episode 2 and 3, Episode 1 had massive shoes to fill, and many would say it failed. However, some would say it succeeded. So let's analyze the film to see if it's good, bad, just kind of meh. Let's see. So the film begins with the ship entering the hangar of our bad guys of the film, the Trade Federation. On this ship is Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi, two very important characters for different reasons, and we'll cover that as the review continues. However, the negotiations are cut short when the Trade Federation leaders attempt to gas the Jedi. This attempt fails and the Jedi escape the gas. From there, they attempt to capture the leaders, but that doesn't pan out. The Jedi then use Force Run to escape the powerful droids that roll up on them. Then they decide to escape the ship and find out what the Trade Federation is up to. So my first question to begin is, why would the Trade Federation try gassing the Jedi? Have they never met Jedi before? They are legit space wizards. They have been trained from childhood to prepare for virtually anything. Why not just rig the assistant bot to, like, I don't know, explode? Excuse me, sir, did you order a fireball? No, I said I'd like the gin. Wait a second, that's a double entendre! Unless the leaders didn't want to destroy their meeting room, I'll admit, that is a pretty nice meeting room. It's just pretty bad, because we're only a few minutes into the movie and there is already a glaring flaw with the logic. However, the story must continue, so the heroes have to have a conflict that they have to easily escape. From here, we have one of the most underappreciated powers in a Jedi's arsenal: Force Speed. This ability is presented as something that is fairly easy to use, especially when it's absolutely needed. But we never see it used again. Not even in the final fight when they absolutely need it, but we'll get to that soon enough. All in all, while I'm poking fun at the logic of this whole scene, I think it succeeds in throwing us right into the conflict of the story. And just in these brief few minutes, we really get a good idea about who Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are. So while part one of this movie has some logic issues and some flaws here and there, ultimately it leads us where we're supposed to be story-wise, so I'll give it a pass. Moving on to our next scene, we are introduced to possibly the greatest character of all time, Jar Jar Binks. He tells Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan that he'll help them, even though returning to his city could mean possible death for him. Which is a pretty loyal and honest thing for him to do. It's almost a redeeming quality for Jar Jar. That just sounds weird. We meet this big boy named Boss Nass, and he just kinda lets them go free. They leave the Gungan city, get chased by sea monsters, and find themselves in the city of Theed. There, they rescue Queen Amidala and escape Naboo. So the first thing people are probably going to expect me to complain about is Jar Jar, because whenever a discussion is made about the quality of the prequels, this handsome fellow always gets pulled in. Well, what if I told you Jar Jar isn't as bad as you thought? Don't get me wrong, he ain't no Han Solo, but I think his entire presence in this film is actually pretty justified. I can just hear the clicking of the downvotes. So while Jar Jar is in this film to pretty much make the kids laugh, he's also there to keep a sense of open-mindedness, to allow the viewer to remember just to have fun with this film. For that is the reason why we go to movies, to be entertained, right? Jar Jar for me always symbolized the ability to remain yourself even when others don't understand you or even hate on you. I think that's an important quality. Besides, Jar Jar went from a bumbling, exiled fool to a war hero. Now, I'm not saying Jar Jar had to be in this film. Honestly, they probably could have just left him on Naboo. But I accept the fact that he's in the rest of this film. And you know what? 2 decades later, I'm okay with that. Now, getting back to the review, Boss Nass is the ugliest creation ever. Look at him, oh my god, what is wrong with you, boy? I mean, it's not just because his CGI doesn't hold up. He just kind of looks like a Crash Bandicoot villain, so ew. With the rest of the stuff, however, while the sea creatures serve no purpose to the story, they do look cool, and the Gungan city is actually a pretty interesting concept. Also, Theed looks and feels like a really interesting, history-filled city, and that gives the presence of a real lived-in location. I mean, if I lived in the Star Wars universe, I'd live on Naboo, right in Theed, probably right there. That's my house, that's my house right there on the bay. Overall, part 2 of this movie does a pretty good job of raising the stakes and continuing the story, so can't have any complaints with that. After escaping Naboo, our hero's ship is damaged. While R2-D2 manages to repair the ship, the hyperdrive itself is damaged and the characters are forced to land on the desert planet of Tatooine. Qui-Gon, Padme, and Jar Jar head to the nearest town where they meet a young boy named Anakin Skywalker. Oh, you're wondering about Obi-Wan? Oh, he just kind of stayed on the ship because, reasons. Qui-Gon discovers Anakin's incredibly high midichlorian count and persuades his mother to allow Anakin to return with him for Jedi training. However, in order to do so, Anakin must win the pod race and win his freedom. He soon succeeds and our heroes head back to their ship. However, they are attacked by Darth Maul. Qui-Gon and Maul fight for a little before Qui-Gon retreats back to the ship. And on board, Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi meet for the first time. Okay, so I guess I'll begin with the R2 scene. I actually like the fact that he's introduced in this way. I think it makes sense that he'd kind of be shown as like a hero. It gives him more significance in the story and why he kind of sticks around, so that's okay. The reasoning for landing on Tatooine makes sense for me. I don't really have any issues with that. I guess the biggest issue I have with this entire scene is the fact that Obi-Wan is just kind of pushed aside for some reason. A big point of contingency for many people is that there really isn't a main character in this movie. And it's true, the closest character we have to a main character is Qui-Gon. And that's not a bad thing. Qui-Gon is a good character in my opinion. He's actually my favorite character out of the entire franchise. The issue is that the main character of this new movie should be the same character we follow throughout the entire trilogy. And since this is Obi-Wan Kenobi's trilogy, it would make more sense for Obi-Wan to take part in more of it. Oh, and what I mean by Obi-Wan's trilogy is that Obi-Wan's trilogy is the prequels, Luke's is the original, and then Anakin's story is the entire saga altogether. Oh, and speaking of Anakin, Jake Lloyd did a fine job in this film. I really don't understand the hate. I think he does a good job of presenting a young, optimistic Anakin Skywalker. Is his acting perfect? No. But is he absolutely awful like people say? No way. Jake Lloyd got way too much hate for his performance in this film, at least in my opinion. Now with that said, let's move on to the pod race. The pod race is really cool for me, not just because it's a good action scene, but it's also filmed really well. If you watch from beginning to end, the action is constantly moving from left to right, keeping you on the edge of your seat the entire time. I also still till this day wonder what color the die would have landed on had Qui-Gon not intervened. Like, what if they won Shmi instead of Anakin? Would Qui-Gon just kind of like take Anakin away anyways? Or would he kill Watto and just bring them with him? We're told later in the film that Qui-Gon is somewhat of a gray Jedi, so it would have been cool to see something like that go down. However, if it had, we wouldn't have had Anakin and Shmi get split in the first place, and that's kind of something that's integral to the entire story. So, yeah. For the Darth Maul scene in this part of the movie, it's kind of like his entire role in the movie. Short but sweet. I'll talk more about him later on in the review. But overall, part 3 of this film is pretty decent and not really many complaints. Alright, we're going to take a brief break to talk about our sponsor for today's video, and that is this book. It's called What Are the Chances? It's going to be an Amazon link in the description below. I definitely recommend you guys checking this out. If you guys love a story that is true, that it takes a young woman through all of America as she explores different places, meets different people, goes through some like crazy, wacky, but also like really cool and also some sad events and stuff. It's so good. Definitely recommend checking it out. Like I said, for many of you guys who have been following me for years, you guys know I don't read books, but this is actually phenomenal. So check it out. Link in the description below if you want. Anyways, back to the video. After leaving Tatooine with Anakin, the group head to the capital planet of the Republic, Coruscant. Queen Amidala heads to the Senate to plead for help against the Trade Federation, while Qui-Gon takes Anakin to become a Jedi. Once again, Obi-Wan just kinda tags along. The Senator of Naboo, Sheev Palpatine, convinces Amidala to call a vote of no confidence on the previous Chancellor. However, Amidala is tired of the corruption in the Republic and decides to take matters into her own hands. Back with the Jedi Council initially don't want Anakin because he's too old, which in turn means he's more susceptible to the dark side. However, Qui-Gon informs the Jedi Council that he'll train him himself. Afterwards, the Council sends them with Amidala to help her out. So Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, Anakin, R2, Queen Amidala, and Jar Jar head back to Naboo to fight the Trade Federation. So this is the part of the movie where the film just kind of slows down. Like, it's essentially just a full chunk of movie that is meant to mostly give a reason for why they need to return to the conflict at hand, while feeding the audience with a bunch of exposition. This is also the most boring part of the film for many people too. And the sad thing is that this entire part would be perfectly fine if the dialogue landed better. So when you talk in a robot voice, people naturally find it uninteresting. They will tune you out and become bored with what you're saying, even if what you're saying is integral to the plot. Honestly, all of my friends, including my Star Wars fans friends, couldn't remember why the Queen decided to go back to Naboo with no help. And I'll admit, even I forgot why until rewatching this film for this review. And the sad part is, that's a pretty badass move for the Queen to do. She realized she wasn't getting any help anytime soon, So she took matters into her own hands. But people don't remember this, although it's a massive moment for the character. Like, it's a really cool moment for Padme. It really makes her look cool. However, because of it being demonstrated so boring, people don't know. People forgot. And that's just the way it goes. Now on the other side with the Jedi, the Anakin not being accepted scene is fine. Even if he's young, he's got emotional connections, and that's kind of like the Jedi's pet peeve. So I don't have many gripes. In a way, I kind of feel bad for Obi-Wan. It almost comes off as if Qui-Gon is just kind of trying to get rid of him or something. But if you consider the fact that Obi-Wan is 25 in this film, to Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan should have been a Jedi Knight long ago. Oh, and I should probably talk about the midichlorians. I don't actually mind them. I know a lot of the older Star Wars fans really are against them. I look at them as a scientific way to explain how the Force is used and less of a new way to kind of retcon and like the more mystical way. It's just two different ways, two different ideologies of looking at the Force. There's the more mystical way, and there's a more scientific way. So I don't really see an issue with it. That's just me though, of course. Overall, out of all the parts in this film, this one is definitely the weakest. I mentioned all the reasons for why. It's just plain boring, and there's a lot of important stuff that happens in this part, but people forget about it because this is the part where they fall asleep. So that's just the way it is. Back on Naboo, Jar Jar leads a Gungan battle, Queen Amidala goes hunting for the Trade Federation leaders, Anakin accidentally ends up in a space battle, and Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan battle Darth Maul. While things seem bleak at first, Anakin accidentally manages to blow up the Trade Federation ship, which happened to be controlling the battle droids below, allowing the Gungans and Amidala to claim victory. Back with the Jedi, Obi-Wan gets separated from Maul and Qui-Gon. Obi-Wan decides to do normal run instead of speed run, for some reason, which leads to Qui-Gon getting stabbed. Obi-Wan then takes on Maul by himself, but he loses the initial duel. However, using his cunning and smarts, Obi-Wan uses Qui-Gon's lightsaber to outwit the Sith and cut him in twine. Afterwards, Qui-Gon's body is burned, Anakin becomes Obi-Wan's apprentice, and peace on Naboo had been restored. The end. Okay, so one of the biggest complaints about this ending is that there are way too many things going on at once. And for me, I think it's fine. If all four of these different events were hard to follow or convoluted, then I may understand the argument. But each event is very easy to follow, so I'm okay with the constant jumping back and forth because all these scenes kind of impact each other in a way. Now let's talk about the biggest crime from this film. The fact that Darth Maul is such a wasted character. The entire movie, he could be set up to be the Jedi's foil of sorts, but instead, Maul is just kind of there. Not just that, but if every single one of these soldiers shot at the same time while Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan charged him, Maul would be so dead. A little help. But that's just another minor inconsistency, I guess. But back to Maul in this film. There is a reason he's called the Boba Fett of the prequels. Because he looks so awesome. But he does absolutely nothing. Except for dies. It's just so much wasted potential, and yes, I know the Clone Wars kind of fixed his character later on, but this movie should have had him a bigger threat. If anything, he just kind of feels like he was created just to allow for a lightsaber fight in the end, instead of for an actual reason. It's just such squandered potential, honestly. Now, for the lightsaber fight and the score, it was amazing. I don't really need to explain myself. The scene just speaks for itself. It's great. Now we get to the Obi-Wan Kenobi not using the Force speed when he could have. I always figured the reason for this was because George Lucas actually wrote the fight scene first before going back and actually writing the beginning of this and adding that power in, or he just happened to forget. It was an inconsistency, and it kind of messes with a lot of the future things that happen in the Star Wars franchise. It's not a massive deal, but it is kind of like a plot hole, so there's that. For the rest of part 5, I don't have many issues. I mean, maybe it's not the best option to give the Chosen One to a newly knighted Jedi, someone who hasn't had experience training other people. Probably wasn't the best call. Good going, Yoda. It was Qui-Gon's dying wish, so I guess it was the right thing at the time. It just didn't work out later on, but we'll get to those in the future. So with the review pretty much finished, we come to my final thoughts. I don't think this movie is as bad as people say. Now, it's not nearly as good as the originals, but there are definitely redeeming moments in this film. Moments that I think get ultimately skipped over when talking about the prequels. I think another issue with this film is that it doesn't feel like it's necessary to the entire saga. For most of the important stuff that happens, like Anakin being a slave and being separated from his mother, to Palpatine slowly raising in the ranks towards Chancellor, to Obi-Wan mastering over Anakin before he was qualified to do so, it's all stuff that could have been mentioned in episode 2 in like a throwaway line, or even shown in a flashback. So while I like this film overall, I do understand people's quarrels with it. It does feel unnecessary. It does get very slow and boring in the middle. It does have Jar Jar. But it also has incredible music, lush and beautiful worlds, and a pretty badass finale. So in conclusion, Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace is not a terrible film like many say. It's not exactly good, but it's a fine film overall and a fun addition to the Star Wars franchise. So that is it for my review of Star Wars Episode 1. If you want to see the future reviews coming out for the next episodes and maybe the spin-offs, I might do those. If you want to see, and let me know in the comments below. Please remember to like, subscribe, and turn notifications for more. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you guys next time. Love you. Peace.